as we visit with Tom Hart, TV's Tom Hart, host of SEC The Weekend, also known as the Saturday Night Prime Group. Yes?
Greg, we've had this discussion before on other airwaves, but the potential at Florida or the potential at LSU, are either one of those jobs enough to lure Lincoln Riley out of Norman?
See, I think LSU is a remarkably attractive job. Right now, I don't know what's going on at Florida. I really don't. I'll be the first one to admit. I wish I could tell you that I thought that was a super elite job. I do not think at this point it's a top 5 job in college football. I think at one point it was. Right now, with the challenges of each of the last 2 head coaches, I have my concerns about kind of the turnover that they've had in recent weeks and some unreachable, unrealistic expectations, at least in the near term. Not saying they should settle like I talked about earlier, but I think the ceiling, or at least the immediate ceiling at LSU, is slightly higher. That coupled with the fact that you have a remarkably talented state and a certain kid that grows up with the loyalty within that state to LSU, that's a real thing. And I think that it's going to be very challenging for a lot. If they get the right guy at LSU, it's going to be very challenging for the Alabamas and the A&Ms and the other schools that have been going down and carving out a piece of the boot. I think it's going to be extremely difficult for those guys to now leave LSU if the coaching hire is right at LSU. So I think that is, to me, I've said this, I've been on the record, I think LSU is a top 2 job in college football. I think you almost have to screw it up almost intentionally.
It's been proven, by the way,
literally,
the last few years.
Les Miles was inept in many ways. I love Les Miles. His teams played insanely hard. They were extremely physical, but he was inept in a lot of ways, rolled the ball out and won 10 games every year. And there's something to be said for that. So if you go get a remarkably cerebral coach that's a tenacious recruiter, couple that with what can become the LSU football team that's just 2 years removed from a national championship, I think they could be back here in 2 years.
Did you just suggest Dave Aranda for the LSU job, the way you described that position?
I don't like the fit. It's as much as I love Dave Aranda, I think he's perfect at Baylor. And it's not that he won't get looks elsewhere, but I think Dave Aranda is a very cerebral, very thoughtful, I don't know if he's introverted, but it just feels like LSU needs someone that's a little bit more brash. At least that's the way it's been. So maybe they want to overcorrect and go in a different direction. Dave Aranda is the polar opposite to Les Miles and Ed Ogeron. So I could see that being a possibility, but I also think that while Aranda's been good, 1 year of legitimate success, parlaying that into the job at LSU, I'd like to have a coach with a little longer track record.
Tom, if Scott Woodward if Scott Woodward asked you to label what you believe are the qualifications for a good fit as the next LSU head football coach, what would you offer?
Man, that's a great question, because I think LSU presents some very unique dynamics, right? You have to be embraced by the entire state. You have to be tied in politically. You have to understand that you're working with an athletic director that has a very clear vision for what he wants within that program, and he's going to be a part of that program. By all accounts, he's going to be in the football building on a regular basis, and so you need to work hand in hand with an athletic director who believes in his own power of persuasion in some respects, but also his ability to go out and help you fill out a staff. And so you have to have an open mind and be willing to say, yes, this is a guy that I want to work with to build this program in both of our images, especially when it comes time to bring in other staff members. You have to be available publicly. I mean, you have to be a face of the program. You cannot hide in your office every day. I think that's important. But the number one thing is you have to win. And how do you do that at LSU? You recruit, and you have a 5-hour radius that is home to some of the top players in all of high school football. You have to continue to do damage in Houston. You don't have to get everybody in your state. I mean, that's been proven, right? They don't get everybody, but yet they still had a national championship and arguably the best season we've ever seen in college football just a couple of years ago. And Ed Ogeron had great success going out to the West Coast and getting guys from Southern California and dipping into other states and even further west within Texas than just Houston. And I think one side note to that we're all still trying to figure out and getting a better feel for is how does the transfer portal impact programs like LSU, and who can you go out there and nab? We saw what Kirby Smart did, in filling some holes this season. And I think you have a chance to go out there and use the LSU power and the power of a possible championship to fill whatever holes you may have this coming year.
I think transfer portal, if you're LSU, should be a massive benefit to what you're trying to do and how you're trying to operate.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.